The accused, Mr. Smith, says because a bid bond is what gets filled out, and if the defendant or the accused does not, quote, settle, pay, or discharge the claim, he defaults or dishonors the court. The bid bond, the performance bond, and the payment bond gets sold to the U.S. District Court, where these bonds are bought up by insurance companies and then sold on the open market, mainly to the Japanese and Chinese, which become the primary collateral source of our economy. The judge says, oh, that bid bond. Mr. Prosecutor jumps in and says, Judge, this is ridiculous. This man is charged with multiple counts of crime, and the state is asking for the maximum penalty. The judge says, what about that, sir? Looking at Mr. Smith. And the accused, Mr. Smith, says, Your Honor, is this a tort action or a commercial crime? If it's a tort, then where is the injured party? If it's a commercial crime, then where is the contract? Mr. Prosecutor jumps in and says, Your Honor, this is an outrage. This guy is accused of murder. The judge says, no, he does not. Mr. Prosecutor, you have no claim against him. It isn't his responsibility to bond your claims. He looks at Mr. Smith and says, Sir, you're free to go. That was the entire court transcript.
What was the case?
Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think it took me 10 minutes to read that to you. That whole court case only lasted 5 minutes.
The name of the case?
It's a really old case from about the 70s. And it is People versus Smith. It's a Nevada case. It reminds me of the case I won in New York. People of New York versus, and then my friend's name. Walk into the courtroom. The judge is called for a jury trial. The jury's sitting in the jury box. The sheriff brings my friend in. I'm sitting right there. And the bailiff calls the case. People of the state of New York versus my friend's name. I'm not going to tell you his name. I said, Your Honor, is the jury a fair representation of the people of the state of New York? And he said, yes, it is. I said, well, how on earth can the people of the state of New York both be the jury and bring the case against my client? And his face went white. He discharged the case that fast. It was over. This is the shortest case I've ever had. The people of the state of New York cannot be both the jury and the prosecution. New York got so used to doing so many things illegal. And one day I'm driving a U-Haul, pulling a piece of hydroponic equipment across the state of New York at night, and I hit toll booth after toll booth after toll booth on an interstate highway, just driving through the state. Never even got off on an off-ramp. And I get back home to Oregon about a week and a half later, and I get a letter in the mail that says, you owe $191.75 in tolls. So I wrote a little lawsuit, just for funsies, to see what had happened. And I wrote a little lawsuit against the state of New York for putting tolls on a federally funded interstate highway. And I said, how could the state make a profits off interstate commerce that's federally regulated and not regulated by the state of New York. If you rule, this was just in the lawsuit, if you rule that that is illegal, you need to move the toll booths off of the interstates, and you need to provide services so that people traveling the interstates don't have to get off the off-ramps and get into the state of New York to transact necessary things for the right to travel, like bathrooms, gas, food. You've got to provide them. And the judge had no idea what to do with it, so I changed it to the Supreme Court of the state of New York. And I sent them the same lawsuit. Paid the fee, opened another case, and the Supreme Court of the state of New York they made a decision. And it cost the state of New York billions of dollars to move all the toll booths to the off-ramps and put rest areas where they could get off and get gas, food, and go to the bathroom without paying a toll. Now you can drive all the way through the state of New York on an interstate. As long as you don't get off the off-ramp, you're not charged a toll. Because you have the right to freely travel. And that's what the whole case was about, the constitutional right to freely travel, which has already been decided by the Supreme Court of the United States in a whole bunch of cases that we just listed a few. And they did that. Never even had to show up in court. It was cut and dry, black and white. All they had to do was offer a summary judgment. It was done. Parts of a lawful contract. There's 8 parts to a contract. 8. Don't let an attorney tell you there's 2 or 3. They're lying. Usually, if an attorney's lips are moving, they're lying. Number 1, parties are competent to contract. The parties to a contract should be competent, being of age, of consent, of sound mind, and not disqualified from contracting by any law to which he or she is the subject. Flaw in capacity may be due to minority, lunacy, idiocracy, drunkenness, or dissimilarity of kind. The parties should be of the same kind, being either legal fiction actors or natural living men and women. Allowing more than 2 parties is okay, but never a mixture of kinds and their respective jurisdictions. That alone right there tells you there's more jurisdictions than just Admiralty, right? Number 2, free and genuine consent. The consent of the parties to the agreement must be free and genuine. The consent of the parties should not be obtained by misrepresentation, fraud, undue influence, coercion, or mistake. If the consent is obtained by any of these means, then the contract is not valid or legally or lawfully enforceable. Number 3, there must be full disclosure. When negotiating a contract, full disclosure is a step of providing all material information or telling of the whole truth about any matter which may influence the decision-making of the other party or parties before they decide to enter into a contract. If either party fails to make full disclosure, the contract is null and void. Huh? It does. We've got to unwind the clock somehow. Everything is about notice. Valuable consideration. Nothing happens automatically. Okay? Number 4 is valuable consideration. The consideration is something of value possessed by the parties that is brought to the contract table. This something of value is bargained for and given in exchange for a promise or a performance. The parties must each receive a benefit and each suffer a detriment. To be enforceable, a contract must have valuable consideration. A contract is unenforceable if it has insufficient or unequal consideration without an agreement. Number 5, certainty of terms. The terms and conditions of the contract must be fully disclosed and agreed upon and must be certain and fixed. Any subsequent variations of the terms must be agreed upon. So if in the future conditions change, new terms and conditions are written, and it must be agreed upon by both parties. Okay? Number 6, a meeting of the minds. A meeting of the minds is a consensus ad item. It occurs between the parties when they recognize each other, understand their mutual obligations, and agree. A meeting of the minds occurs between living men and women in lawful matters, under common law jurisdiction, and between legal fiction actors in legal matters, under admiralty maritime jurisdiction. A contract must be either lawful or legal. If one party to a contract makes a signature as an accommodation party to a legal fiction person, while the other party makes an autograph for a living man or woman, the parties are of unequal kinds and the contract is null and void. And that's where a lot of our beginners get into trouble. Is they'll start autographing documents that they should be putting their signature because they don't understand the jurisdiction of something they're trying to achieve. There are times to sign in blue and make it a signature and make it a contract and hold somebody accountable while operating in commerce. There are times to sign it in red and make it an autograph. Between living men and women. And there are times, like President Trump signed every executive order in the center of the page, making it a trust, and you should sign that in purple. 3 colors, blue, red, and purple. All 3 colors each represents a jurisdiction, land, air, or water. To take dominion, to subdue it, you must have the knowledge to know which jurisdiction you're operating in at the time. And that's where a lot of us screw up when we're young. I'll just call you young and dumb. Okay, sure. I'll repeat it. It's very easy. On every piece of paper that you produce, you have the debtor and creditor side. In the jurisdiction of, I'll just use different color pens. You place a signature on the left. That's in admiralty law. That's a signature. Signature. Sign here, sign here, sign here. Every time they tell you, it's on the left-hand side of the page because you're acting as the debtor. The creditor is the man and woman. The man or woman is the beneficiary. You're the creditor. They don't call it a debit report. You got Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. It's not called a debit report. It's not the companies you owe money to. It's the companies you lent money to. That's why it's called your credit report. You extended your credit. We're modern money mechanics. You extended your credit. If you get a $2,500 credit report from Capital One Finance, you signed an application allowing them to take $2,500 out of your trust and give it to Capital One to lend you back on your plastic at interest and sometimes a yearly management fee for doing it. It was your credit that created it. Remember, it is illegal for a bank to take money out of their shareholders' accounts. Capital One's a bank, a Federal Reserve Bank. And they can't take money out of their shareholders' accounts, and they can't take money out of their customers' accounts, so where'd they get the money to loan you? Your signature, the same place everyone else did, that's right. Your signature on the application created the funds out of your trust because they're a Federal Reserve Bank, and where is your trust held? In a Federal Reserve Bank. Anybody got a Social Security number with